On today's episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, John Story returns to discuss the history of and personal experiences with point-and-click adventure games. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Retro Gamers Podcast, your home for casual coffee table conversations on all things retro gaming. Anthony here, and joined by my good friend John for 2026. John, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
How were your holidays? How was your New Year's? All that fun stuff?
Holidays were very good. Got to do some fun retro stuff.
Cool.
So my big get this year was getting my Sharp X68000 up running.
I'm very jealous of that. I want that in my collection so badly.
Yeah, I mean, I got it from Japan on one of those Japan auction things. And of course, it came to me completely non-functioning, as they always do.
Shocking.
Yeah, they all need repair. And George Portugal actually did the repairs for that. It came to me, he brought it up. It still had an issue with the MIDI board attached to it and the RAM expansion all in one. So I actually had to order, and he had the same kind of an issue. So we each ordered a new one from a different, I wish I could remember the guy. It's from France. And that one works perfectly because you need extra RAM to run certain games like Final Fight and Street Fighter on them. And the versions of Street Fighter on there, and there's Castlevania as well, are excellent.
Cool. Yeah. You gotta show that off one of these days then.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they based the CPS-1 Capcom hardware off of. So it was like, I think they might have done some development work for those on these computers. I could be wrong, but essentially it's very similar hardware.
So basically, you spent the holidays just down in your little computer dungeon.
As much as my wife would let me. Yeah.
Nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I tried spending a lot of time gaming during it. I failed miserably, as always. Something else that came in the mail recently from a friend of mine, my friend Frankie, who is a really, really good friend of, 30 years now, I think. And he always sends me fun stuff. He's a big eBayer. So he always gets all these cool things, and he shares some of them with me. So he sent me an Atari Game Station Go that he got from somebody.
Oh.
So really interesting little handheld. I did obviously. I popped it on to see how it works. Everything works fine. It's got a good library of games. It's got like Adventure, Cannonball, Centipede, Atari Dig Dug, like a whole bunch of good stuff. Screen's really small. But it also has a slot for an SD card, so you can add whatever you want to it. So just a cool little.
That is pretty neat.
Yeah, cool little device.
Huh.
It's got a little bit of a curve to it.
Yeah, I see that.
I guess for comfort.
I like the fact it's got 6-button layout.
So I'm assuming they planned ahead for when people put stuff on the SD card for games that require, 6 buttons, because obviously Atari games only had one.
Oh, I wonder, when did this actually get released?
I do not know.
Because it has the much older style of USB.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's not super recent.
This is really cool.
Yeah, it's not USB-C, but it's a cool little handheld.
Huh. That's nice.
So I added that to my collection. On top of the other handhelds I've been adding now, like I'm slowly.
Did you get a PSP?
Jack gave me a PSP, so
Jack.
I now have a PSP in my collection and 2 whole games that I bought myself.
Which games?
I got like a Capcom Classics collection.
Okay.
And I think was it Pac-Man World 2 or 3 that I saw when I was up in Canada.
Were you
over the holidays.
A Final Fantasy Tactics guy back in the day?
I
so
did
the PSP version you'd probably like a lot.
Ooh, okay.
So
gotta get that.
I have that in my
collection. I have to start going through the PSP library to figure out what I need.
There's some incredible games on it.
Yeah, and then next up, I need to go back and get. I don't have a Game Boy Advance. I have a DS and a 3DS. I don't have a Game Boy Advance, even though the DS plays it.
The original
The original Game Boy Advance.
Oh.
Need to get a hold of one of those.
I have 2. I have one is backlit with a new screen.
Nice.
And I have the original.
Yeah.
So
and then
if I have a third one, I'll hook you up.
Yeah, let me know. Game Boy Color, I gotta get on. And then an original Game Boy, which I have, but it's so broken.
I can hook you up with an
that
original Game Boy.
I need an OG Game Boy.
5 of those.
Only 5?
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've broken an episode into 2 parts. It's very possible this one may actually do that because it is a large topic. We're going to be talking about point and click games, not specifically point and click adventure games. I guess they're all kind of adventure games because there are plenty of point and click horror and like different genres and stuff like that.
Well, I'm only going to talk about point and click adventure games.
Well, I know because horror freaks you out. I totally get that.
No, I've got some horror. Like
I know.
I have no mouth and I must scream is right up your alley. That's a point and click adventure game.
Yeah, I know. And actually the
I have that one.
yes, the documentary Terabytes that I had recommended a few months ago, and I had Richard Moss on the show talking about that, covers I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is definitely in this category. But we're going to go through a little bit of the history of point and click games. I know, John, you have a lot you always have a lot for show and tell because your library is insane. I have a few things to do show and tell wise. And then I just thought, like, we'll go through a little bit of the early history. We'll talk about some of our favorite games in there, some of the most impactful games that we had in there. And then we'll wrap all of this up. So, John, I know you and the way that you research. So you're going to go back to before point and click adventures to show us how we led up to that.
So I think, to be fair, we're going to, I mean, you kind of alluded to it. We're going to talk broadly about adventure games, these narrative kind of experiences that are, the pace is certainly different than what we normally would play, like a Mario or, you know, a 3D shooter. Like I always liked adventure games because they tended to give me more time to think. My brain doesn't move that quick. I'm not great at platforming games. You know, I'd rather have the ability to kind of sit and work on a puzzle. And that's what a lot of these games have. They're narrative-driven puzzle games. But when I look at point-and-click adventure games, for me, that's typically a third-person view where you see your character moving around and you interact with the game environment with a mouse. That said, while I consider that a point-and-click adventure game, you can't really get there without talking about the forebearers of the genre. So the first really kind of adventure games, these are all these point-and-click adventure games, their DNA starts with essentially 2 games, and I'm sure these have been talked about before, but you know, real quickly, they get Colossal Cave Adventure and Zork. Zork and Colossal Cave Adventure were programmed on a PDP called the PDP-10. And so one of the things that irritated a lot of IT departments is they realized a lot of that time that was being shared was being wasted on these text adventure games that people made in their spare time. Now, these games eventually did get commercialized and sold on home computers like the Apple II and IBM PC later on. But these games were they were completely text driven. There was no graphics. You know, you'd start the game and it'd tell you, say, hey, you're in a room, and it'd give you some very basic descriptions of your environment. And you'd have to be like, well, go over here, and to say, well, you can't see over here. And then you have to be like, okay, feel for a light or whatever. I don't remember exactly the beginning of these, but you'd have to like interact, and you'd have to hit on the correct keywords. And the first adventure games that we often throw into point-and-click adventure games had no mouse. Like especially Sierra games and the early LucasArts games like Maniac Mansion, which we'll talk about later. We call them point and click, but without a mouse, they're technically not. But for sake of argument, we're going to throw them in there because those series continued on to the point where they were point and click, and they were the same kind of a thing. You could see your character, and from a third person, you'd move them around. And like a famous example would be like in King's Quest, like you'd move them, and if you're too close to the river or creek, it'd fall in and start drowning. And what you'd you'd drown and you'd die. But what you'd have to do, and you're like, well, why do I keep dying here? I got to get to this other side somehow. And you'd have to think logically, swim. You'd type swim, and suddenly you're not drowning, and you could just move your character to the other side. But those kind of mechanics come out of these text adventure games.
Yeah, and obviously when, you know, that's how they had to design them because, you know, a mouse hadn't been invented yet. It wasn't, you know, obviously being used. So everything involved, you had to involve your keyboard. Your keyboard had to do everything, whether you're walking using the cursors or you're just typing in the direction for somebody. You know, where it's like, oh, you know, go west. I remember playing all of these types of games where it's like, go west, go north, and then it tells you what your next screen is. Before, you know, and then, obviously with Colossal Cave, with Zork, before we got to visuals, which I want to say Mystery House may have been one of the first to do that.
Mystery House in 1980, and then its follow-on, I think the same year, The Wizard and the Princess by Sierra Online, which ended up, that Wizard and the Princess kind of was the inspiration that spun off King's Quest.
Yes.
And these graphical adventures that Sierra were making, Sierra, when IBM decided to come out with the PC Junior in 1984 to have a cut-down version of the PC, one of the advantages it had over the PC was it had a graphics hardware that allowed to display of 16 colors and 3 voices.
Yeah.
So it was slower than the PC, but it was much more capable graphically and in audio. And I mean, the audio still wasn't great, and that standard became the Tandy standard. But the thing about IBM, they wanted something to showcase. And if IBM hadn't come along then, Sierra would have folded. So IBM coming then saying, hey, we need something to showcase this home computer that we want to release, saved Sierra Online. And so the great technology that Sierra came up with, these disks that, I mean, graphics take up a lot of space, right? Yeah, so especially bitmap graphics. And so they very wisely decided to come up with a different way of displaying what are kind of cartoonish, blocky by today's standard graphics by essentially using vectors. So the game data didn't so much have graphics on it, but the formulas or the instructions to draw in real time the graphics. So on the much slower computers like a PC Junior, when you would go to the next screen, you could literally kind of see it draw in the screen as you, so like the tree would kind of get outlined and then the color would pop in because it was so slow. And then eventually it was all there, and then you can kind of move around and interact with it. But that was light years ahead graphically of every other genre, like arcade, you know, shooters. I mean, they were very basic, like Atari 20, barely better than Atari 2600 on the PC because it just didn't have, especially the PC Junior, that power. So it was a way to showcase what was otherwise very limited hardware. And that's why those adventure games took off. And using vector graphics, that was the way things were for a long time, just based on the limitations of the medium. Discs were expensive. You can only hold 360 kilobytes if you use both sides of the disk. Not a lot of space. So they very cleverly came up with using vector graphics, and then companies like Sierra and LucasArts very, very smartly developed tools like engines. Like we have engines today, like the Build engine or the Unreal engine that you could reuse for other games. They did the same thing with like the Scum engine for LucasArts, or I think it's AGI for Sierra, and that's so they were able to kind of churn out games quickly because they used those same tools. But yeah,
well, I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, you want to create one engine that can do multiple things. I mean, that's just, you know,
it was brilliant. Otherwise, you're in assembly or machine code having that.
You're starting from scratch every single time.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a little bit of a background there. And then, yeah, I know you mentioned Sierra, and Sierra's going to come up quite a bit. Yeah. Sierra and LucasArts are probably going to come up quite a bit during this show because Sierra was right at the forefront of all of this.
They had very different approaches to gaming, but yeah, those were the juggernauts.
Those were the two big ones. And as we moved on into this point and click style, where they made that adjustment, where it's like it's not just all about you typing in what you're going to be doing. You're actually going to be directing where your character's going to go, what your character can touch. That came about closer to the mid 80s.
And the pixel hunting.
Pixel
hunting didn't come along until you had the mouse.
Yes.
Right.
So I wanted to go back and talk about the very first, what's considered the very first point and click game, because I know
you gamed me on this one. I was wrong.
Well, I mean, I guess it's I don't know if it's debatable or not. I mean, I don't think it's debatable, but if you go online and you search, a lot of people have pointed out that Enchanted Scepters is considered the first point and click adventure. And that came out in 1984. But
on the Macintosh.
On the Mac.
Yep.
But with my research, I found a Japanese game from 1983.
On what system?
This was released on PC. Well, I'll just list that, like PC, MSX, NEC PCs, Sharp X1, FM7, Sharp MZs. So a few of the NEC PCs, 8801, 9801, 6001. The name of the game, I'll say it in Japanese first, which will be fun, is Star Arthur Densetsu Wakusei Mephius, which in English is The Legend of Star Arthur 1, Planet Mephius. I don't know how to say, or Mephius maybe. Mephius. Was released in 1983, developed and published by T&E Soft, July 31st, 1983. It's a sci-fi opera set in the year 3826. The Galactic Federation is aware of is at war with the fleet of the Giamil Empire. Star Arthur, who is the player that you're playing, Star Arthur travels to the planet Mephius in search of the legendary energy sword.
Sounds very Japanese.
It's very Japanese. It's very Star Wars-ish.
Yeah.
Which, at that point, it's like you want to copy what's popular. I believe Return of the Jedi came out in 83. So it kind of fit nicely. And the reason why this is considered point and click, again, you had a limited number of action words or verbs on the screen that you can choose from to do things. But then after typing the action, again, there was no mouse yet, but you would use your cursor on the keyboard to select something in the environment that you can interact with. So based on that description for this game, it's the reason why, I would put this as potentially the first point and click adventure. Even though it wasn't mouse related, you still needed to use your cursor to search the environment to click on items.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I wonder which system that they targeted with the mouse, because like the MSX was not. I'm sure there was a mouse, but I don't know if that was a common thing. I'd be curious which system they did that on first.
Yeah, but again, we also think of point
83.
We also think of point and click in the sense of you need to have a mouse to do the point and the click.
Yeah.
But if you're using your cursor and hitting enter,
that's
still pointing and clicking.
You're right.
So
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
you could have totally done that. And while we're talking about the Japanese, I mean, it's important to remember that the Japanese took a lot of influence from American game design. So, like, if you look at the DNA of JRPGs, there's a lot that they borrowed from series like Wizardry and Ultima.
Oh yeah.
And it's no different with adventure games, like, going back to the purely text games like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is a text adventure game, like we were talking about, pure text. This style of game was popular in Japan, and as they started to adopt kind of similar mechanics for their adventure games, they kind of started to see that there was a big market. Like, there was much more of an interest in narration, and they liked the graphics that were coming with games from like Sierra and LucasArts, and a whole genre popped up in Japan that, to the best of my knowledge, was never popular in the United States, and that is the visual novels. And there's a lot of similar DNA with the visual novels and adventure games, and that's like too big a discussion to have here. And frankly, it's not an area where I've had a ton of experience, but I know they're huge in Japan. And a lot of it is just stuff that doesn't necessarily translate well here.
No.
Like dating visual novels. And,
the dating sims and all that stuff.
High school romance, and
Oh yeah, they have a ton of those games. I'm always amazed by how popular those actually are, because they make so many of them. They make so many of them.
But there are some good, like, horror-based kind of. I don't know if this falls in, like, Dead of Brain, I think is the name of it. Which was big on the MSX. I think there was a PC Engine, which now has been translated in English, which I think people on Etsy are selling. Dead of Brain is kind of, I don't know if the visual novel is the right word, but it's heavy on the narration and adventure. So I kind of think it falls somewhere in here. There's some action-y type stuff, but like Snatcher or Police Knots kind of has a similar vibe. There's some interesting things that came out in Japan, and more of that is getting fan translated and released. So I think that, and then with augmented reality, glasses coming up, like, that's going to be the way to play a lot of these Japanese games, because you can put these glasses on and they have cameras, and they will in real time translate and overlay over the Japanese characters you're seeing the kanji English, which I can't wait till that becomes mainstream.
Well, and that'll be the ultimate point and click adventure because you're actually using your hands to grab things and point to things and
Well,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So it's a whole new. You're gonna go. a
But
whole
I'm just
new-
talking about like playing Dragon Quest on a Famicom.
Oh yeah.
So like the text on the screen will be Japanese, but it'll automatically. You've done it with Google Lens or whatever.
Of course.
Overseas.
Yeah, terribly.
But I mean, it's better than nothing. Sometimes
Yes.
the translations
Yes.
are.
Yeah. Excuse me. Why is that lamppost in the ocean? That's not what I asked.
Right.
But yeah. So again, no surprise that I found a Japanese game that predated something Western that came out.
Mhm.
But you know, Enchanted Scepters, a lot of people point to as really the first point and click adventure game. And just a little bit on that game. It was developed by Silicon Beach Software for the Macintosh, released in 1984. And then just a brief blurb on the story. The player must find 4 fire, earth, air, and water scepters hidden across the kingdom and return them to the wizard. And how the game played was the screen shows a picture of the room that the player is currently in. You have to click on an item in the picture to pick it up. The pictures don't do anything. They're static images, but obviously change when moving to a new room.
Mm-hmm.
And when an enemy would pop up on the screen and you would encounter an enemy, you got a drop-down menu to choose whether to flee or to fight the enemy. And hopefully you had weapons to fight the enemy. But that's the essential gist of Enchanted Scepters.
And it created a whole kind of subgenre which was really popular in the Macintosh because every Mac, of course, came with a mouse. They were not third person like I traditionally think of point and click adventure games.
Yep.
They were first person, and like, you know, one of the most popular ones would be Shadowgate.
Yep. Which you have sitting back there on my shelves there.
So,
by the way, all the games on the shelves behind this are not mine.
So Shadowgate is very much, I don't know if this will show up in the
It'll
camera,
show up.
Yeah. So this is it has more of a first person view. You can kind of, it's like you're looking through the character's eyes, and there's a lot of text, and you have to interact with the mouse on the environment. Like you'll see a rug, and you know, you can't get forward, and then you think, oh, maybe if I click on the rug, there's something underneath it, and there's a key under the rug, that kind of thing. So you can interact with your environments using the mouse, and that was pretty innovative for the time. I don't know what year this came out. 87. So not 3 years after Enchanted
Scepters. Yeah. And but again, it became that whole thing where it was like, you know, how do you interact with the environment? And like, you know, in today's gaming standards, you see a lot of that happening in like escape room games. Escape room games became this whole big thing more recently. But it's all the same exact thing. It's like you go, you're stuck in a room. You have to find a way to get.
It's like 999 on the DS or Hotel, whatever.
The Nonary games. Yeah, 999. Which, by the way, I downloaded that on the PS4, devoured it, absolutely.
Is it
loved
good?
That game. Oh, I love that.
So
game.
I have it. I just haven't played.
So I played that one and the 2 sequels afterwards.
Okay.
But the first one was the best one by far. Multiple endings, all these different things. Yeah, absolutely love that game.
First person.
First person.
Yeah.
But again, but the story is really interesting. There are 9 different characters in the game that you're interacting with along the way. So it's really, really cool. But those types of games really, you know, came about because this all started, you know, in the 80s with these point and click adventure games where you had to manipulate the limited space that you had to make something exciting, intriguing. What I always find interesting too about the early days of these games is that they're very fantasy based. A lot of them are fantasy based. Mm-hmm. So we're talking wizards, knights, all of that type of fun stuff, because I guess in that genre, it's like you can kind of stretch the imagination as far as you want to go. You know, it's not like something simple where it's like, oh, you know, you're playing this guy who's in his office. You know, and you're trying to find a way to, you know, get out of your office and have an exciting life. It's like you go right into this fantasy genre, which, or sci-fi. You know, fantasy and sci-fi always seem to be the go-tos. Before we got into real horror, I think a little bit later on. The other one that I had on my list, at least in the beginning, and now, well, let's have a little discussion about this one, because King's Quest is always listed as a point-and-click adventure. Now, the King's Quest series as a whole, I agree, is point and click. But when we're talking about the beginnings of point and click adventures, King's Quest 1, for all the research that I did for it, because it came out May 10th, 1984, from Sierra, I could not find any indication that when it first came out, it was point and click.
Oh, it's definitely not. It was a
Yeah.
parser driven.
Right. It was
Yeah.
parser. Right. And explain parser driven a little bit.
Parser is
Yes.
just like everything you do in a game to interact with the world has to, for the most part, other than moving your character, you'd move your character with a joystick
Mhm.
or the keys on the keyboard. But when I say parser driven, what I mean is to interact with the world, you have to type everything, and sometimes the puzzles are timed, and so if you're a terrible typist, you could be frantically like, like me, I'm 25 words a minute, like making tons of mistakes, and I hit the backspace, and then I'm dead.
And then you're dead.
Like Space Quest 1's a good example of where it's easy to die, and this also is a good time to bring up how the logic of certain companies, right, was the game design logic was very different. So Sierra was happy to kill you, and so you'd have to constantly save your game.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you could nerf the entire game by forgetting to pick up something that you didn't know you needed to pick up on that first screen. And then you can't go back to that first screen. And so you'd have to start the whole game over, which is, to me, horrible game design. And Sierra games were notorious for this. LucasArts generally did a much better job of this. LucasArts games, generally, you couldn't die. Like, Guybrush Threepwood from Monkey Island would fall off a cliff, and he would, miracle of all miracles, hit a rubber tree and bounce back up, right? And so, which I think carries the spirit well, and the killing the character never made sense to me because you could save anytime you want.
Right.
So all it made you do is just save constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly and frantically.
So I was going to say, so the paranoia of saving started here.
But it was typing for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like King's Quest, I want to say it was parser driven until the 5th game, maybe.
Yeah, like that tracks more for me. Even though it does get lumped in as like a point and click adventure, I really feel like it doesn't qualify for it, at least.
It took a while because even when the mice were released for the PC for years before it became a standard thing in the games, because they were expensive and it was just one more thing. It's kind of like, why don't, with the Commodore 128 being so much more double the RAM, the 64, well, how many games actually took advantage of that? There was like 5.
Yeah.
And then it came down to, like, if you're a game developer, would you write your game for 10 million Commodore 64 owners, even though it's compatible with the 128, right?
Yeah.
Or would you write so it's required to have 128K, and then you're hitting like 500,000 users? I don't know the exact numbers, but so it's the same thing with the mouse. It's just, for a while they wanted to wait until it got to a point, and then it
where
became like
a mouse,
right, because it wasn't as easy to make that an optional thing. Like some things they could make optional, like sounds. So Sierra was a pioneer in creating music optionally. Most computers only had a PC speaker, just one sound channel, beep 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 beep, right? And they'd make very crude sound effects and music. And so Sierra, early on, would take things like the Roland MT32 and then ad-lib sound cards for FM synthesis, and they would, the MT32 wasn't really intended for games. It was a musician's sound module. It was a box that had, like, essentially the early technology of something similar to MIDI, and they had recorded piano and violin and drums and whatnot. So when a song was playing and it called for a C sharp piano, it would send that out to the MT32 if you had one connected to your computer, and you'd hear an actual piano. So it was orchestrated music, could come out of these very crude and underpowered machines, and it was amazing. The only downside was, and Sierra started selling MT32s in their catalogs alongside the games, and I never knew a single person who had one because they were $600. In 1980, it was like 7, I think, or 5.
Even still, $600 is a lot of money back then.
Yeah, and they also they made it cheaper a little bit. Like, I think they had a $5.99 bundle in like 87 or 89 with King's Quest 4, or no, I think it was 5. And the Roland MT32. But again, I don't know a single solo had one. So fast forward to today, these were, because I would set up my game, install my game, and always ask what kind of sound. I always said PC speaker because we didn't have any sound cards in our computers. And I'd always see Roland MT32. I didn't even know what that was.
Mhm.
And so fast forward to today, I'm like, of course I want to get a Roland MT32.
Of course.
So now I have Roland MT32s and sound canvases from another Roland product. And it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. You could do an entire thing on like computer sound, like the different, the way like Commodore approached it, Atari approached it, and then the pitiful PC sound for the longest time. And that would be an interesting show, I think.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me future topics.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. But circling back to
I'm sorry.
where
yes.
we are with point and click, that was that's okay. We segue all the time on this show. Moving away from King's Quest, one last thing to point out about King's Quest that I wanted to say is that I didn't realize that the King's Quest 1 earned the distinction of the first 3D animated adventure game. I had no idea that they had christened it that. So,
well, I mean, I guess you could move 3-dimensionally within a scene.
Well, yeah, because
right?
in scenes, like if you remember the very first,
it wasn't a plane. It was
no, but if you remember the first scene, like you moved up and down, but you could also go like behind the tree if you wanted to. So like that, they consider that 3D. So,
sure,
yeah. So hey,
way to go, Sierra.
The Retro Gamers Podcast is brought to you by Old School Gamer Magazine. Sign up for as little as $20 per year for 6 issues that include feature articles, interviews with retro programmers, new and old product reviews, and more. If you look carefully, you'll even see an article or two penned by yours truly. You can head over to oldschoolgamermagazine.com/retrogamerspodcast and sign up so they know where you heard about it. Old School Gamer is dedicated to you, the old school retro gamers from the arcades to your home. Moving on from the very early days, John. I know now, like, I want to start getting into talking about more impactful, because we can talk about a million point and click adventure games.
Sure.
And when I say impactful point and click games, I mean either games that were impactful in the sense of the genre itself, or games that just were impactful for you personally. Because I enjoy point and click adventure games, but I will say my experience with them were kind of spaced out in terms of when I interacted with them. Like my very first interaction with a point and click game was King's Quest. I can't tell you which one it was. Like maybe it was 5 or 6, whichever one it was. But that was my very first point and click game. So that's why like it always comes to mind when I hear the words point and click, my brain goes to King's Quest.
That's interesting. And it's a lot of people's first point and click adventure game, but I didn't have much exposure to that except for on a PC Junior at my uncle's house in the early 90s. He had this old PC Junior, which by then was ancient. And I thought it was still pretty cool.
Yeah, see, my Commodore 64 was the first one that I had. In fact, this is not my OG, of course, but right here, you'll see, I still have my little CD binder. These are all the PC games I have left that I kept from a long time ago. But at some point in the 2000s, I bought the collection on CD.
Yeah.
This was done in 2000. Well, it doesn't tell you when it was done. But okay, this will tell you enough. It was done for Windows 2000 and XP.
Yeah.
The CD-ROM. And actually, if you see right next to it, Scratches is the last point and click adventure PC game I ever bought. And this was probably somewhere around 2007. I saw it in the store and I just said, I'll give it a shot. And I enjoyed it.
That's one I've never heard of. Who made it?
This was done by Nucleosis.
Nope.
And Got Game Entertainment.
Oh, Got Game, yeah.
But you'll find like with a game like this, I feel like it just copied other games. Like you'll notice the story is very familiar. It's like writer goes to a mansion and starts uncovering some supernatural mystery-esque kind of thing, which will send you straight to Phantasmagoria.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very Phantasmagoria.
Yeah, so the reviews on it were not the best, even though on the disc itself it says Game of the Year from Just Adventure. They declared it Game of the Year.
So this is a good segue here real quick, too. Like these collection of King's Quest.
Yes.
These probably will only work on XP or 2000.
Correct.
Because they're not the original versions of the game. They're probably emulated through some kind of a DOS emulator, right? Yeah. So moving forward to today, and I was going to save this for later, but this is a good reason to bring this up now. There is an emulator called ScumVM.
Oh, yes, I've heard of that.
So ScumVM is phenomenal. It's on pretty much every platform you can think of. It is on everything. Like even Amiga OS, I think, has ScumVM, but you can have it on your iPhone, Android, your PC. and it supports over 150 games from numerous different I think you can play Blade Runner on it, all the Sierra and LucasArts games on it, and that point and click, you essentially can move a mouse cursor around with your finger on a phone. And I think maybe you might need a plugin, but I think you can do things like emulate the MT32 on it. So if you want to know what that sounds like, you can do it through ScumVM, I believe.
Oh, that's cool.
And DOSBox has similar capabilities, but ScumVM I think is a little bit easier to get up and running. So if you want to try some of these games out, and some of the games have gone public domain, like let's see,
such as
Beneath
as you search through your endless supply.
So Beneath the Steel Skies, I believe public domain now. It's free. This is a very good game. This was made. Who made this? Was this Westwood? I can't. No, Virgin. Virgin made it.
It's right on the front.
So Virgin made it. Very, very good. Kind of future. You're in the future as opposed to like a fantasy thing. So it's kind of a dark dystopian future.
Ain't so.
You could do it through ScumVM. So.
I was going to say, those were your two. It was either fantasy, where you feel like you're in the past, or it was like sci-fi future.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first point-and-click adventure game that really grabbed you, or that you had?
I do, 100%.
And you have it here, I'm sure.
Well, I don't have the version, so we have a lot of remasters today.
Of course.
You can play the same game on, what's the one on the PS3, PS4, PS5, and they have a TV show.
They have a TV show?
Yeah, it's a zombie mushroom thing.
A zombie mushroom thing?
Yeah.
Walking Dead?
No.
Last of Us?
Yeah, Last of Us. Thank you. Like, they remaster the heck out of these things.
Of course.
So Sierra, back in the 80s and early 90s, they made a lot of adventure games, and the ones that sold well, or they deemed their marketing would do very well, like this is a good example, Quest for Glory 1, they'd remaster. So this is the VGA remaster. Nice. The original was CGA and EGA. It's just VGA and EGA for the remaster, and it moves it to a point and click and away from the parser. Right. This was the first game, but I didn't play this version. I played the parser version first, because I want to say we could play it off the diskettes in the computer lab of the school. My school was a private school that had no money, and we had even for the early 90s, outdated IBM PS2 Model 25s, which were these all-in-one, think of like an iMac, but like from the 80s, even older, and all-in-one, 2 low-density 3.5-inch floppy drives, black and white, monochrome. It was probably monochrome VGA, but essentially you have two, white and black. That's all you had to work with.
Yeah.
And we had all these Sierra games, and this was the one on this and Space Quest 1, which I have.
Space Quest 1, yeah.
The remaster
Roger
to
Wilco.
that. Roger Wilco. Excellent games. The great thing about Quest for Glory, and this was probably 1990, 91, I played that, was it incorporated aspects of RPGs. So you had stats to deal with. You can play as a fighter, a thief, or a mage. And you had to do some grinding. Like there are certain things you'd have to like climb up to this thing to get whatever thing, whatever item to further the story, but you couldn't do it unless you had a climbing skill of whatever. And so you'd like literally have to go to a tree and say climb tree, and you see him scramble and you couldn't get up it, and you do it like 50 times and you'd see your score tick up. You also in that series could keep your character and move them into the next game. So there's like I think 5 Quest for Glories, and you can keep your character, and say you're a magic user, you keep all your spells and stuff. So you start the second game with all of your stats and your spells intact. And to me, that game, you're essentially an adventurer, shows up in this valley in this vaguely European, like medievalish kind of generic medieval valley, and you'd have to go to like the guild, Adventurers Guild, and that's where you would essentially further the plot of the entire thing. Like, the Baron's daughter's been kidnapped, and then there's also this evil witch, and there's this, and the valley's closed off because of these brigands, and like you've got to figure out how to do all this stuff, and you fight through these very crude action sequences. So that's another thing that people forget. It wasn't just pointing and clicking. And there were action and like mini games that were built into a lot of these things. And I'll be honest, the fighting in this is not great.
No, I was going to say the fighting is probably the weakest part of a point and click game, because there really is not much you can do.
Well, the engines just aren't really
They couldn't
designed
handle it.
for that kind of action.
Yes.
So, if you're going to play Quest for Glory 1 and you don't want to deal with the wonky fighting, my advice is to play as the mage, and then you can do a lot through spells.
Just do spells and
yeah,
be
and
done
that's
with it.
kind of the way to go. Although I would argue the most fun way to play that game is as a thief, and make sure, because you have a few points that you can play with when you're setting up your character, that you put like 5 points to magic, because then the thief can do some of the spells.
Oh, that's cool.
Quest for Glory 1, I spent an inordinate amount of time. As much as I like Space Quest 1, I think I probably liked that one even more. I played that so much. We called it Heroes Quest is what we called it, not Quest for Glory. Because when they first released it, that's how they named it, and they forgot to trademark it, and there happened to be another game called Hero Quest. Hero
Quest.
Yep.
And then they switched it to Quest for Glory.
So they had to go to Quest for Glory. Because all the Sierra games are like, Space Quest, Police Quest, King's Quest. And so it made sense to do Heroes Quest, but they couldn't do it.
Oops. That's just an oops on their part.
That is an oops. But that was probably a foundational game for me. And, once the adventure genre kind of died, thank God we still had RPGs and they were going strong.
Oh, yeah. They were. I mean, if anything, RPGs kind of took over.
They did.
They really did take
Baldur's
over.
Gate kind of picked up the slack for the death, because adventure games largely died out. And they didn't die out. They never died out, but they ceased to be the dominant genre in 97.
Yeah. Well, before we get to 97, we're still
back up.
We'll back up. We're still in the 80s. So aside from King's Quest, wherever I played it, I don't know where the heck I played it. Now that we talked about it, the game that really hit me first on console, because I was a console player more than I was a PC player. But the first one that hit me on console was Maniac Mansion. So this is where I got a deep dive into what a real point and click adventure was like. More so from a really cool perspective, because it had like a Maniac Mansion to me was like a little sci-fi, a lot of sci-fi, a little horror in my opinion. But I just loved the concept of that. And on Nintendo, there weren't really a lot of games that did a point and click style. And credit to LucasArts for releasing that.
I can't think of many.
Yeah, exactly. Like off the top of my head, Shadowgate was
King's
on there.
Quest.
I think I don't know if
King's Quest 5 was on there,
I think King's Quest 5 was. I don't know if Shining in the Darkness was more of a dungeon crawler, I think, than it was point and click. But there weren't a ton of games on there.
How was it on the NES though?
On the NES, I thought it was great. I mean, you used your cursor, and actually, it's one of the ones I have to show and tell. But here's my copy on the NES. It's not the best copy. It feels like it got a little bit of water damage to it,
and it's not a great publisher.
Jellico.
I don't think that they're renowned for their games.
I used to grow up calling them Jellico. But actually, when you hear it in their Japanese commercials, it's Jellico.
I'm very intrigued. I've never played this.
Yes. So, and I do love on the back. I mean, if you want me to be interested in the game, just write, "Why is there a chainsaw in the kitchen?" I go, sold. I will buy any game that asks me why there's a chainsaw in the kitchen, or any other weapon for that matter.
In a nuclear reactor in the basement?
Yeah, exactly.
And why disembodied tentacles hopping around?
You know what? These are questions that need to be answered.
It's very B-movie sci-fi.
Sci-fi, which at the time, of course, was right up my alley, because this was the 80s and there were so many B-movies out there, although I was more of a B horror movie guy.
Yeah.
B sci-fi was right there. And again, Lucasfilm, Lucas Games, which put out quite a good number of games. I mean, at this point, this was when they were doing their heavy hitting. But an absolute
1990.
This came out in 1990. That's why I'm saying I King's Quest hit me before this, because
this came out in the computers. I don't know what year, but well before that, I think.
Oh, it definitely did, and it was based on the original Lucasfilm games, and then I don't know if you know this one, but see the TV version on the Family Channel. There was a television show based off.
I have heard about it.
Yes,
but I've never seen it.
I've never seen it either, and I want to see it. So, but
is it on YouTube?
It has to be on YouTube.
I'm gonna have to find it.
We're gonna have to search. We're gonna have to search that out, especially because I loved playing this game. I played this game so much.
We could MST3K that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That'd be fun. But you know, I will say, when on the NES, I don't think I ever beat it, and I'm not sure if I ever beat this game because I don't remember the ending. I used to always get stuck.
I always feel bad to say because I played its sequel, which I love.
Day of
to
the
death.
Tentacle
Day
is
of the
super
Tentacle
fun.
is
Yep.
incredible.
Everybody talks about how fun that game is.
That game, I remember getting that when it first came out on my computer, felt like a cartoon, like an actual interactive cartoon. Same thing with Full Throttle. But I feel terrible to say I've never really played that.
It's a really fun game, and if you know, for those of you who have never played Maniac Mansion but know of it, there are 6 different teenagers, and the goal of the game is that Dave's girlfriend, I'm gonna say her name because it's worth saying. Dave Miller attempts to rescue his girlfriend Sandy Pants from a mad scientist whose mind has been enslaved by a sentient meteor. So again, the name obviously is, but what you do is there are 6 different characters. You pick 3 of them, and you walk through the mansion trying to find Sandy. You have to choose Dave because he's her boyfriend, so he has to go in. And then you choose 2 of the other characters, 2 of the other 5, and each character has like some type of special ability. So, like, in other words, like, I don't remember all of their names. In fact, if I take this out, I don't know if I have the instruction booklet. I probably do not. I do not have the instruction booklet of this game. But the different characters have different abilities. So, for example, the guy who looks like a nerd in the game, and he's got like the white shirt and the pocket protector and stuff like that. Like, he's really good at fixing things.
It looks like the main character from the movie Nerds.
He does, like Revenge of the Nerds. And that's what they did. They took so, and then there's a surfer guy and a couple of other, different female characters in it, and each one could do something specific. So you would play through it, and then you would get to certain points in the game where a character that you had chosen would, like, let's say, find something that you could fix the telephone with. But if they didn't have the ability to fix the telephone, they couldn't do it. And then you'd have to switch to another character and bring them into the mansion. And then there were certain things you couldn't do depending on the 3 characters you picked. I remember all the time playing this game, and Dave, to me, is completely useless. Aside from being Sandy's boyfriend, there was nothing special about him. He couldn't really do anything. So what would happen in the game is that if you got caught in the house by the mad scientist or his kid or the wife who was dressed up as a nurse, they would take you to the dungeon, and you would be locked in the dungeon. And the only way to get out of the dungeon is somebody had to press on a hidden brick and hold the brick while you escaped. So what I would use Dave for is I would throw Dave in the dungeon. So if any of my other characters got caught, he would press the brick so they would get out. And then I would just use
that's a good tip.
And then I would just use the 2 of them to figure out the story, and move along in the game. But this game took up so much of my time because I just loved exploring the whole thing. Never figured it out. I never went back and did did a walkthrough, like read a walkthrough to like finish it. But I love going back to this game, just experiencing it because it's just so much fun. And then moving into the 90s, this is where I really started getting into point and click games because I got a PC, like an actual PC with Windows 3.1.
Sound card?
I had a sound card.
Oh, wow.
I had a sound card.
I was a big spender.
I was fancy. Yeah. Well, family was a big spender. I was not a big spender at the time. I was still in school.
Yeah.
But this is when I really started to uncover games, especially more horror-based games, because they started to do a lot of horror-based point-and-click games. And obviously, I've talked about this game 1,000 times on the show. I won't get into it too much, but Seventh Guest, which is one of my favorite games of all time, was an awesome point-and-click supernatural horror game.
See, it's funny because like I never would have thought of it as a point-and-click game.
Why?
So I get that technically speaking it is.
It technically is.
But again, my very biased definition is, generally speaking, third-person perspective. You see your character moving around and you interact with the environment either through a parser, which again would violate just the title of what we're talking about, point and click. And yeah, basically third person mouse or parser. Like,
Well, I mean, and it could
this
be
is first person puzzle game.
well, and see, and
Yeah.
this could be me kind of making an exception in my brain for these kind of
No,
games.
but it fits the
But
mechanics. You're using a
and
mouse.
it does fit the mechanic.
There's just more. It's more of an emphasis on puzzle than narration. There is a story.
There is a story for
Right?
sure in
Yep.
both of these games. The
Yep.
sequel, 11th Hour, as well. But see, and
You just
then
don't seem to interact with the story as much as you do in a typical point and click adventure game.
right, well, because you're not seeing the character on the
Yep.
screen. Yeah, and I understand that, but I also think when you talk about
It's very linear too.
well, but when you mentioned something like Eye of the Beholder, was there a character on the screen? I always
but that's
thought that
not
was
a
first person.
that's an RPG. That's a hack and slash.
Okay,
RPG.
so we're going okay.
Yeah, I don't
But-
consider that a
but
point
when
and
we
click adventure.
but when we talk about stuff like these, like
Mm-hmm.
Myst, because I'll bring up the Myst series as well,
Mhm.
you're still interacting with the environment in some way. You're
Mm-hmm.
clicking on the environment, especially like with Seventh Guest. It's like
But that
you're
was a huge shift in adventure
huge
games.
shift. Oh, an
Massive.
absolute huge shift. So if you do consider these point and clicks,
Yeah.
now you're getting into the realm of like, oh, it's like we can do these really great rendered 3D environments that you can interact with your mouse. So I just thought that this was the evolution of point and click games because now we were starting to touch on more,
But ironically, it's what killed what I consider point and click games.
which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But when they first started, I thought that these were just a brilliant evolution of point and click because now it's like now it's going through my eyes. And by the way, this is somebody who I've said on the show many times. First person shooter games, I can't play. They give me headaches. I was like, but these types of games where it's more of like
the pace is much
the
slower.
pace is much slower, and you can follow it better. Were just a lot more fun for me. And again, going up to Myst on the PlayStation. So now we're going into the mid to the late 90s because I didn't play this on PC. I got it on PlayStation first.
That's an interesting choice.
Yep. But then, of course, with PlayStation, more traditional Clock Tower, which I've also talked about on the show ad nauseum. I don't have the original, my original case for it. I don't know what happened to it, but this is the more traditional. You have the character on the screen. It's same thing, point and click, but you don't. This one you don't do the, telling it what to do. Look, open, close. You're actually using your mouse to interact with the actual environment to open and close things. You would choose different when you were having conversations with people. You just choose what certain answers you wanted to do or what direction you wanted to go in to really, to unfold the story. But again, when it came down to like the scenes where you're facing Scissor Man, that was more of your point and click because you're running, you're hiding, you're finding ways to survive, basically.
Yeah.
But really, yeah. But to me, like these were the evolution for point and click for me.
I think photorealism and video, because they saw the CD-ROM, which was a relatively new technology for computers, for video game systems, as like, oh, we got this great new ability, whereas we were restrained by the size of floppy disks before, which by the early 90s became a big problem, right?
Yes.
Because remember I said at the beginning of our discussion how, adventure games, point-and-click adventure games generally use vector graphics to draw the scene, and that was based on economy of disk size, and and then eventually, computers came along. Instead of 360K disk drives, they had the high density 3.5, which was 1.44 megabytes. So I mean, that was an enormous amount of space, which is great for vector graphics based games. But at a certain point, computers began to be shipped with VGA graphics, and that got to a point where more people had VGA than not. And so then there was a massive shift in the adventure game genre to bitmapped graphics, where artists painstakingly created each screen with beautiful, like kind of hand-drawn graphics. I mean, hand-drawn typically on an Amiga or something digitally, but these beautiful games suddenly ballooned in the amount of space they took up. So an Amiga, which was like the gold standard for years for adventure games, they had a low density 3.5 inch, so 720K discs, roughly, give or take, or maybe 800K discs. And you would get a game like Monkey Island, and it might come on 12 discs. If you didn't have a hard drive, you're like disc swapping like crazy. So the CD-ROM was great. And like the first Sierra game, I think, that switched to bitmap graphics was King's Quest V. And the graphic fidelity of King's Quest V versus King's Quest IV is like night and day. It's just gorgeous.
Yes.
And you saw LucasArts doing similar things as well, like with Monkey Island was
Monkey Island was
big
one.
hit for them. All
Mhm.
three of those games were just beautifully presented. And then, as you moved into the 90s, their games became more and more cartoonish, took much more size, and then everything switched to CD-ROM because there were advantages. Like now,
Yeah.
instead of synthesized music, you can have Red Book audio. So you could take like Full Throttle, which had a phenomenal soundtrack, and pop it in a CD player and listen to tracks on your CD player.
Yeah.
It was incredible, but it also led to laziness. And so they thought, well, people love the novelty of seeing actual video on your
Yep.
computer. So they started mixing point and click aspects of adventure games that we've been talking about
Mhm.
with highly produced video. And this helped and hurt because, one, they didn't understand how to do that. It was a learning process. Two, it was ridiculously expensive. Instead of teams of 6, you had a game of like Phantasmagoria, which ran into the millions of dollars and years of production. It actually did turn a profit, but hundreds of people to produce what was a handful of people producing before. And so the adventure genre, the point and click adventure genre, killed itself.
Well, yeah, because they were, but
because of technology.
Well, I was going to say, because of technology advancing and because they wanted to take advantage of that technological advancement, because if you think about it,
the genre always did.
Well, the genre always did, but they wanted to make sure that they were keeping up with everybody else because they didn't want to fall behind. And again, the ones I showed you, like Seventh Guest, 11th Hour, they were some of the earlier ones that took advantage of that full motion video.
And it looks quaint now, but if you could put yourself in the mind of someone back in the day when you would play like King's Quest or whatever, and then you get your first CD-ROM in your computer and sound card and put the Seventh Guest in.
Well,
it was like seeing colors for the first
time.
Well,
that's why I was so floored by it, because it was the first game I ever put in where I'm like, holy cow. I go, I'm watching like, cutscenes are obviously common these days. I was like, but I'm watching an actual cutscene. It's like I'm watching a movie, but then I'm dictating how the movie progresses as I'm playing the game.
Yeah.
And it was just monumental at the time. And, it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like you had to be there to experience it.
Yeah.
Because the impact of it was so huge. It's hard to replicate that today, because you look at today, and again, I will never knock consoles and the progressions they've made. But when you go from like PS3 to PS4 to PS5 and you look, have the graphics been enhanced? Sure. Yes, everything's amazing about it. I go, but it's not a leap forward. It's just kind of the next step forward in what's already been established. When you go back there and you're going from, again, the little King's Quest character, which is like a flat screen with a bunch of simple colors, and then all of a sudden there are actual actors on my screen in a video game I'm playing. I mean, I just remember being so transfixed to the screen.
Yeah.
With that. And again, my first foray into that was, in my opinion, a point and click game. And so point and click games, again, started with me in the 80s, but they really became cemented for me in the 90s as like such a genre I will always go back to and enjoy.
A golden era. The 90s really was the golden era of adventure games.
Yeah. But to your point, where it started to fall apart was with that, because people, again, it was expensive to make. They were trying to find different hooks on how do we get people invested in this, and then they started reaching out to Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
And they started like, what actors can we get a hold of? I know you have one over there. Bring up Frankenstein.
So this is a good example. And this is also a massive shift in how the game was presented.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
So Frankenstein, you'll see right on the front, a cinematic adventure starring Tim Curry. So they started to go to Hollywood and they started to grab
John Rhys Davies,
everybody. The Ripper is another one, which
Christopher Walken,
which starred Christopher Walken, and a couple of other actors were in that too. I can't remember.
Daedalus Encounter is another one with Tia Carrera.
Yep, Tia Carrera,
and then,
fresh off of Wayne's World.
And then with like Full Throttle. This is one of my favorites. It had Luke Skywalker. What's his name?
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill. Who really has done phenomenal work, much more so impactful than his screen time doing voice acting. He's done the voice, I think, for all the animated Jokers.
He's the definitive Joker.
He is
in animation.
Yeah.
animation.
He has a very plastic voice. He's
Yeah.
incredible.
It's fantastic. But we started to see a lot of this coming out towards the mid-90s. Again, and one of the other games that I point to, it's not necessarily point and click, but Five Nights at Freddy's actually took the concept of Night Trap and turned it into a point and click style game.
Right.
But Night Trap with Dana Plato from Different Strokes.
Yeah.
You know, like, so that's where full motion video went, and point and click dove heavily into this.
Yeah.
So heavy into it that it wound up imploding.
And you were putting all your eggs in this FMV basket that really limited the number of games a company could release. So now, instead of releasing 4 or 5 games in a 2-year period, a company might only be able to release 1 or 2.
Yep.
And if that game did poorly, because some of these games were incredible, but they didn't do well. Like then the shift to 3D with Doom, the graphics that people were getting used to in Doom and Quake. Adventure games thought, well, you know, the people making adventure, well, we need to do that too. And they would do that with games like King's Quest, Mass Eternity. This is the last kind of true Sierra King's Quest game. It had 3D FX graphics probably in the back. And it made for a very, very clunky, partially adventure game, partially action game. And it was pretty awful, frankly. But there were some companies that managed to pull it off. Like LucasArts did a great job, but then they didn't sell. Right. One of your favorites.
Grim Fandango?
Yeah.
Grim Fandango was phenomenal. Absolutely love that. Anybody who has not played Grim Fandango, the story is absolutely brilliant. Starts a little Beetlejuicy, where you're introducing something like, you know, you're in the underworld, you're playing as Manny, you know, and it's like a film noir detective story. And it's so much fun. And the graphics are amazing. They're colorful. Probably one of the best point and click adventure games in my opinion, and definitely worth anybody's time. But yeah, to your point, like by the time that had come out, point and click adventures were on. They were pretty much
heavily on the decline.
Yeah, they were heavily on the decline.
That was 1998 when that came out.
Yeah. So, and as we went into 3D, like you said, like with that King's Quest, at that point, nobody wanted a point and click. You just wanted to grab your and you didn't even want to use your D-pad anymore. You wanted a joystick, so you can control your character and run them around the screen. You did not want to point and click your character around the screen. So, so point and click adventures kind of went off.
Well, the beginning of the down slope was video, incorporating video, and then when they tried to do it with 3D, they just could not find. And plus, the 3D. It does not hold up well. It's very early 3D. But another good example, again, LucasArts, is I forget the name of the Monkey Island game, but they did a Monkey Island game in 3D that was actually pretty decent. And I want to say it was also on the PS1 or PS2.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I know for sure the PC game I played that, and it's decent. Like not as good as Grim Fandango, but also good. But like this was kind of like the beginning of the end. And one of the really nails in the coffin was the granddaddy of all this, Sierra. Was sold in 1996, and once they were bought up, the direction moved to like Half-Life. I think one of the last things that I think Ken Williams did, and I could be wrong on the timing on this, was to acquire the Half-Life license for the PC. So they realized there was so much more money to be made in at that time in 3D shooters and real-time strategy games. You know, it Command and Conquer style of games.
Nobody wanted the slow going.
They never disappeared completely.
No, and I can point to one right here because I put it on my list of a very interesting game, not retro per se, or kind of on the cusp of retro, but going in. This came out on the Nintendo Wii and other platforms, but the Back to the Future game, which again, they did it. It's a 3D style game, but because of the content itself. It made for a perfect point and click adventure game because you're going around, you travel back in time, you're trying to save Doc Brown in 1931 this time. So it's an original story that takes place after Back to the Future 3. But you're walking around town and you're interacting with people the way a point and click adventure game would run. So it was a way to use 3D graphics while still keeping the format of a point-and-click adventure game.
And the Wiimote worked great for that.
And the Wiimote was perfect for that because you obviously could direct it. And again, it was not a game that was made to be where, like, perfect example, the fantasy genre thrived on point-and-click adventure games, right? But by this time, your fantasy games were more tactical, were more 3D. 3D,
Sure.
take control of it. This was a way to do it from a story-based perspective. And when they did it from a story-based perspective, it worked really well.
Yeah.
If you fast forward beyond the Wii, with Telltale and how Telltale, succeeded with Batman, with Walking Dead, with the Marvel franchise. They did Guardians of the Galaxy, and they did a few other.
They did Borderlands as well.
They did Borderlands as well.
Tales from Borderlands.
Yeah. So Telltale found a way to succeed with that for like a decade, and then of course it wound up falling off, and they went out of business.
But some of the traditional PC adventure game, series managed to limp along. I shouldn't say limp along. Like do fairly well.
Yeah.
So like Broken Sword series. Here's the first one, Circle of Blood. This came out in '96, towards the tail end of the year Sierra was sold. Mm-hmm. And that is a very cinematic kind of feeling. It's cartoony art. It's no video, thank God. It holds up very well because of that. But that series did fairly well to the point where I think like that might even be on a Game Boy Advance. I can't remember. Oh. They've released on numerous platforms, and like The Longest Journey is another example that was on a PC, multiple gaming platforms of a traditional style point and click adventure game with that third person perspective. Like they limped along. Imaginarium is a great game where you play this little robot that came along in the early 2000s on a Mac and a PC. These games continued to come out. They will continue to come out. And I don't want to be remiss. I should have written this down before, but there have been homebrew developers that have taken, we talked about remasters. Well, Sierra only remastered a handful of games. So like Space Quest 1, Quest for Glory 1, but King's Quest 2, 3, 4, nope. There's the sound quality is not great. The visual quality, again, kind of by today's standards, not great. And so they gave that kind of Space Quest 1, King's Quest 1 Sierra VGA remaster look to all these games. And I think they may have had to rename them slightly different things. You guys are going to have to Google this, but they're free. They're free games. They're very, very good. There's been a lot of that kind of activity. There's been some of these famous, like Ron Gilbert of Monkey Island fame has since come out. I think they might have released a new Monkey Island game that I think divided fans. There's also been a number of games, new IPs that they've released that do relatively well. So the genre is still alive. It's just never going to be the dominant. The gaming genres have grown, like the 3D shooters, the tactical 3D shooters, real-time strategy. Like these things were not really a thing when the adventure game genre was big.
No. But I think we can wrap this conversation up. For all you guys out there who are watching this, what are your thoughts on point-and-click adventure games? Have you had any experience with them? If you have, what are some of your favorites out there? Do you still play point-and-click adventure games? Are there ones that we missed that you think should have been mentioned on the show?
Oh, there's thousands.
I'm sure there are, but I want to, but I want to hear what other people loved playing. Yeah. So please reach out everywhere you can at Retro Gamers Podcast. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube and Spotify. We're on Instagram, Blue Sky, you name it, you'll find us. But we would love to hear from you. John, this was an incredible discussion.
It's good times.
And I can't think of anybody else I could have this discussion with aside from, you, because you've got such experience in this.
It's got to be my favorite genre of games.
So for that, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you? I know you're out there somewhere.
Oh, man. NY Retro Tech. I have a Facebook page, and it's basically a collective of people that are into retro games, retro electronics, retro media, like Laserdisc, things like that. Yeah. NY Retro Tech.
And it's a great page. I am a member of it. So I love seeing the updates on that. And every once in a while I throw something up there where I'm like, because I'm like, I feel like I'm always the PC dummy where it's like, hey guys, remember this? And everybody's like, oh yeah, of course we remember this. So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. But for everybody else out there, we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.